You're listening to Stella Speaks, a podcast about bitchCRAFT. In this podcast, we take feminism and witchcraft, social justice and self-care, throw those in the cauldron, and see what bubbles up. I hope you stay for a spell. Today's episode is one in our question and answer series. So the format is there's a question at the beginning that I'll discuss in some length. Today's topic is, are you Wiccan? And then at the end, there's an opportunity for more Q&A because I am recording these live. Just a brief note about indigeneity, indigenous land, and acknowledging that. This podcast is recorded on the illegally occupied ancestral land of the Erie, Kaskaskia, and Mississauga, here specifically up in Northeast Ohio near the lake. If you want to learn more about the Indigenous history of Northeast Ohio, I have a little bit of information if you go to the podcast on Stella Speaks that I posted April 20th of 2023. It's called Listen First, Declutter Your Witchcraft Introduction. About 5 minutes in, I talk at some length about the Indigenous history of the area. If you're interested in the Indigenous history of your area, check out the show description on Apple Podcasts and Podbean, etc. I will have a link that you can click, which will show you some of the Indigenous history in your area very briefly, and then you can kind of dig in and learn a little bit more. So this question comes up, are you Wiccan occasionally? So we're going to define Wicca first, its historical evolution, and kind of dive into my personal experiences and the ways in which Wicca has influenced my witchcraft and modern witchcraft. So grab your broomsticks and let's fly into this discussion. So first of all, if someone's going to ask me, am I Wiccan? Well, let's talk about what Wicca is. So Wicca is a modern pagan religious movement that draws inspiration from various ancient traditions and practices. Now, some people claim its origins trace back to ancient times and in this unbroken lineage of witch cults, which a lot of that anthropology has been debunked, and we kind of realize it's a little bit of myth building. So Wicca as we know it today, although it is inspired by older traditions, Wicca as we know it today emerged in the 20th century. So key figures would be Gerald Gardner, Doreen Valiente, Alex Sanders. They played pivotal roles in shaping Wicca into a recognized and organized belief system. And then additionally, a little bit later, the rise of eclectic, what I would call neo-Wicca, but essentially like Wicca for all, expanded the boundaries of that tradition, embracing more diverse practices, incorporating elements from different paths, and also not requiring initiation in the same way that a traditional Wicca coven does. So we'll start on my personal journey. So I started out in witchcraft in the 90s, just reading whatever eclectic, witchy, pagan book I could get my hands on, doing spells with friends at sleepovers, things like that. I then joined the Unitarian Church in my mid to late 20s, and I acquired a more, instead of just like my little friends that like to do witchy stuff, I acquired a more, I don't want to say public. Yes, public. I guess a bit more organized, more structured practice, slightly structured in that I would attend about once a month. There was a witchcraft / paganism / earth-based tradition, kind of loosey-goosey Unitarian business group that would meet once a month. And so I would gather with those witches. We built some community there. We had a little eclectic coven that formed. And then in the 2010s, I initiated into a Gardnerian coven. So it was a profound experience. And then I studied in that coven for a couple of years. I attained my second degree elevation. So I did step away. I left Gardnerian practice to explore other paths and to get away from essentially hierarchy, gender essentialism, things that I saw in the community that I didn't love. And I've explored other paths despite my experience maybe not being the best. And I'm writing a whole memoir about it. It's a whole thing. You can, side note, if you go to my Patreon page, I have a few, I think about 3 posts from the draft of my memoir that I'm working on. It's called, the working title anyway, is Naked, Drunk, and Full of Brie. The almost true memoir of how a good little feminist witch like me ended up in a sex and death cult. It's long, so I'm gonna have to trim it down, but that's kind of the working title. Despite the whole naked, drunk, and full of brie-ness of my experience in that coven, I learned a lot, and it influenced and shaped, I think, my current understanding of witchcraft and my current ritual mechanics. That's not everybody's experience. Traditional Gardnerian, Alexandrian, and other British traditional witchcraft, these groups are just falling by the wayside. It was already a small tradition. People don't need the traditions anymore. There's infighting and transphobic nonsense sometimes. So like a lot of these groups are falling apart, and other things are being built in their place. So I think the way of the future is neo-Wicca anyway, and it has been almost, since the 70s and 80s when people started publishing books that showed you how to do it yourself and said you didn't have to have a coven to do it for you or with you. So in that sense, so that's my experience with Wicca. Right now, a big aspect of my current practice is in the reclaiming tradition. So the reclaiming tradition was spearheaded, kind of founded in a way by influential figures like Starhawk, who wrote the Spiral Dance. But now I think she stepped back a lot. I don't see her really as part of reclaiming. She's doing other stuff, but the tradition remains, and it combines feminist witchcraft with activism, social justice, personal empowerment. It's a goddess tradition, but in a very gender expansive and inclusive, trans positive, egalitarian, anarchic kind of a way. And so the tradition emphasizes the power of ritual and magic in healing and in activism for personal and collective transformation. So through our rituals and practices, we as reclaiming witches connect with the earth, challenge oppressive systems, work towards a more just and compassionate world, essentially. In addition to that group, I'm still a part of that eclectic coven from back home. I'm a long distance member, so we all are a little different. We have a Christian witch in there. We have like a whole variety of practices. I am a druid, and one of the other members is a druid. That's sort of separate from my witchcraft, but we just work together. We're adaptable, collaborative, and we just come together to explore our paths while sharing rituals and connections without any sort of curriculum or classes, hierarchy, degrees. Like, we don't have any of those things. So my personal practice retains some of the elements of the ritual mechanics that I learned in the Wiccan Coven. There's certain ways of calling the circle and cleansing and things like that. Some of those tools I have retained and use. I don't use those practices in an obvious way with people who aren't initiated, because I still honor the oath that I took. So when you take an initiation into a coven like that, Gardnerian ones for sure, I assume other covens too. I haven't seen their books of shadows, but I imagine Alexandrians are similar. You promise to keep certain things hush hush, right? So there's certain secrets that you keep, and essentially the secrets are just the information that's in the Book of Shadows, which is like a book, a grimoire, a collection of rituals, poems, instructions, meditations. It's kind of almost like a scrapbook over the years that gets passed down. I don't know if scrapbook's the right word, because there aren't little bits of things, but it's like a cookbook, like an heirloom cookbook that gets passed down and gets added to. So you don't reveal what's in there with too much specificity. And then you don't say exactly like the names of the gods or how things work in the ritual circle. Like that's supposed to be secret. And I promise to keep that secret, so I do. I talk about my coven and my time in the coven, and I'm writing a memoir, but never about anything that happened in circle that's protected by those oaths. Now, sometimes I feel silly about being so dedicated to honoring these oaths within the sacred circle because a lot of that stuff is publicly accessible if you know where to look. But those hold deep meaning to me. So I took one in my first and I took a serious one in my second degree. And so I just do not divulge that information. So as we think about what it means, right, to be Wiccan, right? When someone asks, are you Wiccan? What are they asking, really? Like, are they asking, are you initiated into a coven? Are you Gardnerian or Alexandrian, which are the two main flavors of traditional initiatory Wicca? Or do they just mean, like, are you nice? Because I think Wicca has been that face of witchcraft. Like, we don't hex. We're always nice. We're the good ones. We're the good witches. So I think sometimes people are essentially asking me the question that I talked about in the first episode of the season, which is, are you a good witch or a bad witch? I think sometimes when people are asking the question, are you Wiccan? That's like the true underlying question. The underlying question is, are you a good witch? Are you a good witch? Are you one of the good Wiccans? Or are you a naughty, naughty Satanist or something like that? So there's that. That's part of what I think it is. And then I think also sometimes people that only experience they've ever had with a witch is a Wiccan, and so they're just trying to see, are you like this person? And that I talked about that in my conversation with Cara. I will link that episode in the show description. I'll link to Cara's YouTube, and you see how we talked about how Wiccan or not we are. And that concludes the prepared portion of this. Just looking and checking to see if anyone happened to jump on, because I did not tell anybody I was going live. I just pushed live and hoped for the best. A question. So it was a callery question. Somebody asked me, do I do spells? And the short answer is yes, but the long answer is I will be talking about that in an upcoming episode in the Gemini season. So we'll just table that question for now. Otherwise, I don't see any questions, just comments. So thank you so much for watching or listening, or however you were being here with me. I imagine you're listening right now. You're listening to it on the podcast when it was published. So thanks for being around. Just as a heads up, the Patreon is open for new patrons. So if you go to patreon.com/Stella Speaks Up, I'm doing a $1 special right now. So I don't usually have a $1 level. Patreon's lowest level you could set for your work is $1 a month. And I've never had $1 one. I've always had higher amounts, but I am running a special during the summer season. So while I'm working through the Charm School curriculum with Cara, you can join along or just see what's up, read bits of my memoir, check out, I do tarot scopes sometimes. I'll just write things that are essentially blog entries, but they're only available for Patreon guests. And then you get early access. So I always publish my podcasts on Patreon first. I shouldn't say always, because there was one time Cara's came in real quick, but essentially I post the podcasts there early so people have a chance to listen before the general public. And then I also do live calls on the new moon. All kinds of different goodies are available. And for now, they're available for $1 a month. So if you sign up before Labor Day weekend, it'll be $1 a month only. And you'll get access to like my second tier. I have a 3-tier system, and you'll get access to everything in the first and second tiers for only $1 a month, which the second tier is worth like $20 a month. So you're getting a steal, and I'm going to keep that price for you for at least 1 year. and we'll kind of discuss what we're thinking next year. So thanks for thinking about doing that with me, and have a wonderful day. Blessed be, bitches.